display of reasons. To say simply, and this is Ashit Das' point all the time, he reminds us about it. Reason also has a power to drag you beyond its own force, and you feel helpless. I think there should be a combination. Your management, I think, has to have that beautiful balance between emotions, very controlled emotions, and also very reasonable reason. So I'm also actually introducing a distinction between what is reasonable and what is reason. But we have no time. We can come back to flesh more time on this. But I'll stop here, I think. My 5.5 minutes over?
Yeah, I don't think it's hard and fast.
Okay, I'll just stop here. I have two more points which I will take up later on. The points of what is the connection between dignity, development, future. That point I will actually defer at the moment. I will just wait for others. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just have one small thing to the panelists. The topic has not been framed necessarily with a lens of management education. It need not necessarily be responded to with a management education lens. We are approaching this with the larger faith that if we are looking at this at a societal level, the relevance to management education is something that will emerge from the discussion. So, Professor Nandi, your platform.
Well, we are all nice people here, but that doesn't mean that in the very first session of the conference, we have to be very polite. So I will lay my cards on the table openly, and I will not disappoint you. I will go to the fundamental issues of knowledge, values, and the future. I think Gopal incidentally made a very important point. The capacity to listen is very important, but even more important is the capacity to listen to silences. Because large sectors of the world and in large sectors in this society too, we have ensured that they remain inaudible and invisible too. But the inaudibility is particularly important because we deal with a knowledge system which insists on audibility. If you are not audible, your knowledge is not worth having. No. So invisibility, inaudibility, and knowledge, we are in close relationship. I will now state in very bold terms some of the crucial civilizational differences in the matter of knowledge and values. I think the core discipline in modern Europe is theoretical physics. That's the ideal version of knowledge, the ideal example of knowledge. It wasn't so 350 years ago. It used to be theology. You can clearly see the differences if you examine the roles of the famous universities of Europe. Previously, they had the preponderance of theologians as professors. After the 17th century, it became a preponderance of scientists, most of them physicists of various kinds. The central knowledge system in the Indic civilization is not theology, has never been theology. It was a marginal knowledge system confined to very few, decided upon by caste and interests and profession. Our primary knowledge system was, you can call it grammar or linguistics. Panini was our god, not Ptolemy, as far as knowledge went. And it sees its remnants in Indian knowledge system, but we have given up that at the moment. But you see its remnants in things like when Amartya Sen talks about the argumentative Indian, it is the rules of argument, rules of logic, rules of the grammar of conversations that occupy Indian mind. That's the first point I want to make. I could here illustrate it in another way. As opposed to the European slogan of I think, therefore I am. One response was the African one, Senghor gave it. I dance, therefore I am. I have not been able to think of a proper Indian counterpart of it as yet. I would like to find one. What in one sentence sums up our response to our statement of being? Probably it would be something like, I know that I think and therefore I am. It is a more complicated one. Or I know I cannot think, therefore I am. It is in this context that I will like to mention two cardinal problems of our time and its solutions as it has come out in modern Europe as opposed to classical Europe, and as it might come up in other ways. It's not actually Indic civilization. What I would, as a person thinking of the future, would like us to be aware of. Just because I'm raising questions doesn't mean I have all the answers. I am raising this question so that other people more competent than me can find a response to that. The European problem is this of knowledge, primarily is this, that which was, I think I should also mention that it was described in very stark terms by Shiv's guru and my friend Jit Singh Oberoi in a small book on science and culture. It should have had better audience and readers, but it didn't, perhaps because it is written by an Indian. He argues that previously in Europe, anything to be worthwhile or recognized as creative, it had to satisfy three criteria. I am putting it very crudely, but this is the crux of the thing. It must be true, it must be beautiful, and it must be ethical. This has been done. After the Enlightenment, this responsibility was split. In the new knowledge system, once theology was marginalized and physics became the central science, physical sciences became the central concerns, the priority was split, responsibility was split. Discovery of truth was given exclusively to the scientists. And now, of course, we should include it in the social scientists who claimed a status of science. Definitions and explorations of beauty was given over to the artists, painters, writers, sculptors, and so on and so forth. And determination of the ethics was given over to the philosophers. that was more uncertain business, not worth the attention of scientists or social scientists for that matter. This liberated science for all and all other disciplines aspiring to be like physics, because it was the cardinal discipline. It encouraged all other disciplines to move towards the position of science. The science is value neutral. It can be used for good purposes. It can be used for bad purposes. It depends on persons and institutions. It has its implications. I can give one example to make it very clear, that if you look at the history of science, I have written about this in a number of places. If you look at the history of science, you will find that all good discoveries of science are recognized as individual products of creativity. If you discover antibiotics, like Sir Alexander Fleming, you get the Nobel Prize. That was the first antibiotic, penicillin. There are many reward systems of that kind. In mathematics, you get the Fields Medal. So it is individual. But the misuse of science is never ascribed to individuals. It is always institutional or belong to some other larger agreements, never to the scientists who discovered it. It took me